The pituitary gland is often referred to as the master endocrine gland inside of the body because of the multitude of hormones that it secretes and the variety of functions that those hormones have inside of the body. And the pituitary is controlled by a region of your brain called the hypothalamus. So we often talk about those two in concert with one another and refer to it as the hypothalamic-Pituitary axis because there are neurons inside of the hypothalamus that will sort of control the pituitary into releasing its hormones. Now, the pituitary gland, which we can see sort of here, right? So up here you have your hypothalamus. Here's your pituitary gland. The pituitary gland can be broken up into three distinct components, okay? So this component back here is known as the pars nervosa, okay? And it is sort of posteriorly located, so we often refer to that as the posterior pituitary. This region up here, which I have drawn and outlined in purple, okay, this is known as the pars distalis, or because it is anteriorly located, it's often referred to as the anterior pituitary. Now, this region here in the middle is referred to as the pars intermedia, and the pars intermedia is often very small or almost non-existent in mammals, specifically humans, so a lot of times it gets disregarded in human anatomy and physiology class, but it does play a very distinct role in non-mammalian vertebrates. Okay, so we have our three regions, our pars nervosa, pars intermedia, and pars distalis. Okay, and each one of these is a little bit different, specifically with the pars nervosa. So what you're going to see or notice is that these neurons up here in the hypothalamus, right, if we follow them down, where they end is a little bit different. Okay, so the pars nervosa, we notice that the neurons come all the way down through this little stalk region, which is known as the infundibulum. Okay. They come all the way down and sort of end or terminate at the blood vessels in the pars nervosa. So because of that, these neurons here are what actually secrete the signaling molecule that will be taken up by the bloodstream. So these are referred to as neurohormones. So the pars nervosa is made up of nervous tissue. It's the axon terminals of these axons that originate in the hypothalamus. Specifically, they originate in the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei of the hypothalamus. If we look at these neurons over here, which are going to come from the other regions of the hypothalamus, notice that they come down and they terminate at the blood vessels inside of that infundibulum, right? And so those are going to release some signaling molecules that will then come down and stimulate these cells down here, which will then release the hormones to be picking up by the blood vessels. So the pars distalis, this one down here, is going to be made up of nervous tissue. So your pars nervosa is going to be nervous tissue. And your pars distalis is going to be glandular tissue. So morphologically or anatomically, these two different regions differ. So each of these different regions of the pituitary gland, right, even though they have close connection with the hypothalamus, function a little bit differently. They look a little bit differently, and they're going to secrete different hormones. So we're going to break it down, and we'll talk about the anterior pituitary, and we'll talk about the posterior pituitary sort of independently, and we'll take a look at each of the hormones that each of the regions secrete.